Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brown, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. On the day after, of course, United have lost the Europa League Final, the outcome that we all dreaded. James, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, doing okay. Dreaded, maybe expected a little bit. Something that in the moment feels terrible. In the long term,
Mm,
probably also feels kind of terrible. But
mm.
either way, I think one of the my feelings on it after settling a little are obviously that it wasn't going to make everything good. It wasn't going to make everything bad. But it's a rough one for sure.
Well, what choice do you have? I mean, you're faced to try to find a positive, and what else can you do? This is a situation you find yourself in. I'm pretty deflated. I've
Yeah.
been really deflated since yesterday. Um, so it's hard to get anything from me that's meaningful that isn't really contaminated by how I feel.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a lot to talk about. Of course, the game itself, the result, the consequences of that. Um, of course, some of the fallout from it, the Garnacho interview, some of the things that Amarim said. I saw a Luke Shaw interview with Andy Mitten, which was one of the most somber interviews I've ever seen. Comments from Diogo Dallo and other people. Uh, what happens to Manu? What happens to Bruno Fernandes? Lots of different discussions and questions. The one I was confident going on leading up to the game, United would find a way to win it. But in truth, James, I know they think something like 77% of possession, but we're completely toothless once again. And in a final, you have a one-off game where you can qualify for the Champions League against one of the only teams that's been worse than you in the
Yep.
Premier League, a team that is missing a number of its best players, and you still can't score a goal.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it feels kind of like once we've looked at it, you know, for the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, we've gone after each Premier League game and said we didn't really learn anything new. It was the same story every single week. That's what the game yesterday felt like to me. We didn't learn anything new. It was the same story every single week. You put the team out there, like you say, 77% possession against a low block, against a team that's conceded 50 plus goals this season, more than us, or 60 plus goals this season. I don't know, more than us, I believe. Um, and you can't even really craft much of a decent chance for the most part. Um, I mean, it wasn't even like they just couldn't score. We didn't even make chances that were very good. I think that probably the best two chances of the game were when the ball went through Vicario's hands, smacked him on the head, and went over to Rasmus Højlund, who headed it towards goal and was cleared off the line by Van de Ven. And then the header from Luke Shaw in the 96th minute, that was just about 2 feet left of Vicario as well, probably never going to get in past any decent keeper. Other than that, we didn't even have a chance. There was nothing from many players in that respect to do anything. So it's the same thing. We this is a team that can't score goals, and there's a point where that's the worst possible outcome. The worst possible thing you can do in any game is to not score goals. Nothing else matters statistically once you get down to that.
Yeah, and this has been a problem for quite a while, a problem that's got significantly worse. Basically, what we're left with, James, is the feeling of a team that just basically scraped, you know, um, staying in the league and not being relegated.
Yep.
And that's it. And that's how it feels. I can't ever recall feeling this way as a United fan in the past, where it was this low due to a season. We've all had
Yeah.
low moments. I remember when United, beat Sunderland and City won the league that day. How low I felt. Um, but this is different. And after the game yesterday, you're emotional. I have a number of people that I wanted to take aim at. One of them being Ineos. I mean, I'm sorry, but I know we talked about this on Monday, but this is not sporting excellence, James. This is
Yep.
every single thing they've touched on the field has been an unmitigated disaster, just a complete catastrophe. And we're talking about, do we trust Amarim with money this summer? Do we trust Ineos with money this summer? I mean, it's their money, but why should I have confidence that their manager, who can't win games of football against Premier League opposition, and Ineos, who have no track record of success in football, are going to get this right next season and it won't get worse?
Yeah, I mean that's all how very much how it feels today, and based on what we've seen so far. Um, it's hard to look at it and say that there's any facet of like why one should
Mm,
believe in it, because it would be I mean it'd be wrong to say that, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's a results business. Um, like I said on Monday, like when I look at it, the only thing that I can see with it is that we kind of knew it would take longer to fix this. Not that this is an acceptable level of where we're at. We knew that the state that it's in, is not the consequence of one season or one year, but the consequence of 10, 15, even 20 years of how the
mm.
club has been run, and that it's a tangle that has to be um, fixed and will take time to fix. But again, that none of that speak. That's sort of like, it's kind of the matter of like someone can not necessarily be the primary reason for blame for why something is the way that it is, but whether they're the ones who can fix it or not, there's not a much evidence of that, at this point in time. I can't point to a ton of evidence for that. Um, a couple of things the only positives I can certainly take from it so far. And I think I'm sure to get a fair bit of disagreement on this, which is maybe from you or from other people, which is fine. But I do think that the recruitment, it's hard when you talk about this after 16th place finish, right? To say, hey, that the recruitment was better when you look at it. But when I do look at some of the players, one of the things that has stood out to me, I still think Patrick Dorgu's a very, very good signing, the right type of person that they should be signing. Low cost, all of that, but a good physical, energetic, and determined player. I actually thought he was one who could probably walk away from the game yesterday, having done a decent job of it. Saved United from quite a number of goals with his hard work, getting back, making last ditch tackles, and the things that he did. Lenny Yoro, we've talked about through the season, has always been and come along as an incredible top professional as a young player, and has become really good. I think he was, again, probably one of the only players from yesterday who showed well for himself in that game. And I don't think that the loss cancels out how good he's been throughout the Europa League campaign for us, and the games that he's played. Worked hard to get back from injury to play 90 minutes in that game as well. I think that's, obviously worthy of praise. I like some of the things that we're looking at, the closeness of things like Cunha. I still very much like Joshua Xerxes for whatever reason. I still think he made a difference when he came on in the short time that he did, as much as was possible at that point. So I think it's better, but it also has to be a lot more than that. I mean, the margins for error now, given the situation, are even smaller. And that makes it really tight. I mean, that makes everything really, really tight. They can't get anything. They can't get a single dollar wrong, this summer, in where United are at this point.
Yeah, that's the thing. They're in a position where they can't get anything else wrong.
Yeah.
The consequences of getting other things wrong, we're at a point where there really is no, excuse me, margin of error.
Yeah.
And yet, when we talk about this summer's already started,
Hmm.
right? I mean, season ended yesterday.
Yep.
Uh, and there's a lot of uncertainty over a lot of players. The offer for Bruno Fernandes from Saudi Arabia is 100%. Does he reconsider? Does he now think, you know what? I mean, no one could blame Bruno Fernandes. I know people will say he didn't have a great game in the final. Okay, but someone else has to have a great game from time to time.
Yeah,
Um,
correct.
and
True.
I mean, if no one could blame him for asking himself, "Do I really want to do this any longer?" Because it's exhausting. And he really is one of the few players that can say, "I'm doing what I'm supposed to do." Alejandro Garnacho has this attitude that it's not my problem, it's their problem, but he's wrong. Bruno Fernandes isn't.
Yeah.
Um, there's that question, then of course question marks over a lot of the existing players about who will be there, who won't play beyond Bruno Fernandes, who will be there, who won't be there, who will come in, who won't come in. But one of the things that it grinds on me a bit, and when I hear players talk about, we need to look at what we're doing every single day. We need to, ask, are we good enough? And that, well, the time to do that, lads, was before the match started,
Mhm.
not after.
Mhm.
Like, was this question that obvious to you, before the match? This is just now that this is fine. Like, to me, things need to change internally. Okay, what things?
Mm.
Say them. Are you
Yeah.
seriously going to get in trouble for saying things that need to be changed internally that help this club be successful? Certainly, the football club Ruben Amorim has got no problems digging you out in public if you've got a problem. If he's got a problem, if he need to have a problem with you, so why
Mhm.
can't you say this is your career, your reputation? If
Yep.
there's something outside of you, Cristiano Ronaldo, whatever you think, had the courage to sit down and say these are the fucking problems.
He was probably quite right, wasn't he?
Well, he was
Whether he
absolutely
should have done
right.
it or not, he was
He should
right
have done
about
it.
what he said,
Yeah,
wasn't
the
he?
way he did
Yeah.
it wrong, but he was
Yeah.
right about everything.
Yep.
And we talk about culture. Because culture is not an accident.
Mhm.
Culture is a very deliberate consequence of the priorities of the people that own a business. I own a
Mhm.
business. You own a business. We know how it works. People who the ultimate authority in business is set the culture. Because every human being in a business works towards the goals they're incentivized to achieve. And they learn, just like a monkey does in a circus, this is what gets the peanut and this is what gets the whip. So you amend your behavior to do exactly what you get rewarded for and what you
Yep.
don't. And then you get a culture as a consequence. And I said this, we said this, many people said this. How does Jim Ratcliffe marry a football ideology with a business ideology when the business ideology is always going to be the first principle? And when profit's first principle, everything is a casualty after that. So, you for example, if we spend 20 million on this player, we'll win the Champions League. Okay, but we only get 10 million in prize money. Do you know what? I'm okay with not winning it. That's what a business looks like, right? A
Yep.
football club buys the player that prioritizes success over profit. And so where United are as a consequence of the former,
Mhm.
because it's been a profit first principle led business. That's why we have this culture.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with that, and um, I can make the case that given the financial situation that the club found itself in, unfortunately, it somewhat had to be this way in the early stages, but it doesn't make for a good long term outlook because it cannot stay that way. It cannot be like that every year. It cannot be like that every season. It cannot be, the motivating thing behind that. And I think there's also obviously a balance that has to be struck there. Um, with it, but it has been that way for a long, long time. And then when you come in and make cuts and things like that to the financial side of it, the problem is whether it's necessary, whether it's needed or not, which it was, unfortunately. From the bottom end, what's the difference? From the bottom end, I doubt it feels any better,
Mhm.
or has any different feeling in terms of the culture of winning, you know, to switch from previous management to current management, which is still technically previous management and all of that. Because I can see it, from a coach, from a player perspective, from a staff perspective, from a person perspective. You go from, hey, oh, you got Champions League. we're cutting the budget. There's no money. Every time you get Champions League, we cut the budget because that's all we aim for, and we want to secure the finances after that, to going, we got to make cuts now because we don't have money. At the bottom, it feels the same. Even if the motivation is different, it feels the same to the people involved. And I do think that, I don't have the solution to that, to be honest, in terms of the answer, because there's things that need to happen, but things that probably needed to happen like on the opposite side of the equation, or on the other side of the equation, to balance that out in terms of um how it feels, just the emotion of it, I guess, the the feeling of it within that is clearly, hasn't been resolved. But there's other things too with when in terms of that, which is like, I mean, there are other aspects to that too. Is I still think there's many things that have not been addressed, that have not been dealt with, that have been problems within the culture, within the dressing room, within these issues, and I don't understand why certain things have been allowed to go on unchecked while others have been, that seemingly, in my opinion, are nowhere near that, have been made out to be these massive issues. There's things like that I don't understand.
Yeah, look, I understand you have to have course correction. And what we're talking about, United have been profitable for a couple of years now, but this is the end stage of a
Yeah.
this is a result of their avarice, and this is what it looks like at the
Yep.
end. Um, I spoke to a player who's out on loan, and as of right now, United have yet to communicate exactly what their intent is for that particular player. And this is a bit odd to me that here we are, the end of the season. We've heard things like Tom Keane doing interviews saying most teams plan their transfer business 9 months ahead or so. So you have a good idea of what it is you want to do. Why isn't this stuff being communicated to people? I mean, why isn't that, why isn't a proactive discussion saying, this is what we want? You are not allowed to come back. We're going to sell you, or we want you to come back, or this is like. So I'm trying to understand why a sporting excellence organization like Ineos would feel in that regard. Like, to me, that is relatively straightforward. And these are the things that concern me, James. Look, it's too early to pass judgment on Ineos, but now Ineos are in a similar position to what Amorim are in.
Yep.
Because what happens if United starts badly next season? It's not just Amorim's head on the line.
It shouldn't be, honestly.
Well,
I
it
mean,
won't be,
yeah.
because now people are going to start looking at your sporting excellence team.
Yep.
Your Jason Wilcox, Barada.
Yep.
Wait a minute, these are your decisions. Where's your sporting excellence? Because all it's resulted in for the fans is ticket price increases. You're talking about a new stadium. Win a game of football first. Like, seriously, no.
I know.
I mean,
I
I'm sitting
agree.
here going, this football team doesn't. It's not that they don't win; they don't score goals. Like, they look like a team, James, that don't belong at this level. Like, that's an indictment. They look like a football team that belong at a level below this, because every time I'm at some point I'm saying to myself, maybe it's not fair to get angry at these players. Maybe they just aren't good enough. Maybe they were at one point, but maybe Luke Shaw's not good enough anymore. Maybe Casemiro's not good enough anymore. Maybe, they're good enough at certain levels, but not week in, week out. Because every week I'm wondering, why aren't they giving more? Well, maybe they're giving everything, but they're just not good enough. And that's something I have to. Then I'm asking myself, well, who paid tier A salaries for players that aren't good enough even in the Premier League? Like, I'm sorry, but these are decisions that I want to explain to me. I don't think it's a good look, James, for your manager when two of your three forwards were better under the previous manager who gets sacked for you, and two of the forwards that you loaned out are significantly better than what they were under you. I don't think that's a good look to them. I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of things that are they good enough? Well, how can, if I don't think they're good enough, but then they go out on loan and they show that they are, there's something seriously wrong here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is. I mean, to be fair, I think both the forwards out on loan are also better than they were under the previous manager in the late stages too. But but that even still speaks to a little bit more of the club. But I can't disagree with it. I mean, I do think, personally, from looking at everything, that that the truth of it is that the team really is this bad. I mean, unfortunately, it's kind of crazy to believe that. It's crazy to think that about a Manchester United team. But when you look at everything that's happened, and again, it's not passing responsibility off on anybody involved in that, from the manager to the recruitment to everybody. But I do believe the team kind of is that bad. It is. It's like it's kind of wild to think of it that way,
So
but it
name the
is.
players
And
you think aren't good enough for this level.
right now, shoot, man. All right. I mean, if we do you want me to start with the 11 who played yesterday? Like, who wouldn't be good enough for the Premier League from the 11 who played
Yeah.
yesterday? Yeah. Rasmus Højlund. Kind of an amazing stat, by the way, on Højlund. Not that we have to bully him any further, because Romero and Van de Ven did enough of that yesterday. Outside of a 6-game stretch where he scored 7 goals in the Premier League, he has scored 7 goals in 55 games. Okay, in the Premier League. He took 3 months to get his first goal in the Premier League. He scored 7 and 6, and since then it's been a disaster. And that he got dropped at the end of the first season by Ten Hag. He hasn't been good enough this season. He clearly doesn't have it for this level. I don't know what level he has it. There's a couple good traits he has, but there's so many things he's lacking that you'd ask for from a number 9 in the league. Garnacho has some good traits, but I don't think it's good enough for this level. Mason Mount, I don't believe he should have been given a start in the Europa League final. He has certainly not shown enough over the last 2 seasons to justify that. I think it was a massive error in judgment on that front. And looking at it, he's not shown he's a Premier League level player too. Maybe for different reasons, but it's been 2 years, 3 years rather, unfortunately, if you consider that his last season at Chelsea was very poor due to injuries as well. It's been 3 years since Mason Mount was a good player. That's a long enough time for someone to no longer be that player anymore. Um, Bruno is obviously, for sure. He's made that clear many times in the right position and with the right people around him. I think Casemiro doesn't have the legs anymore, simply due to age and the mileage on his body to play at this level. He didn't play in 4 of the last 7 Premier League games, and he still looked just behind the play when going up against younger, energetic midfielders that Tottenham threw out there. But I do think there's places where players like Casemiro can still be successful, because he's obviously incredibly talented. Like, you go to Italy, something like that. I think there's places in Europe he would still do well. That where the pace of the game maybe is a little slower. Patrick Dorgu, not yet, but I think he could get there. Luke Shaw, nope. He's not looked great since coming back. He's not looked great in a long time. I wish he were still the player he was, but he's not, and we haven't seen evidence of that. Maguire, I think, is certainly still a Premier League level player. Lenny Yoro, clearly. Mazraoui, I think, is as well, but not. I think he is as well. I think he's a good footballer. I think Ahmad is. I don't think Onana is. I don't think Onana should be starting for any team in anything of substance. There's the lack of confidence I have in Onana every time he's out there. Every second he's out there is something to be said. And then when you look at the bench, I think it's players who haven't yet proved themselves for the most part in there. Players who are at the end of their careers, and Eriksson, Lindelof, who's not good enough, and players who have yet to solidify themselves as to that point. I don't think it's a 16th place level team on the balance of things overall, but when you factor everything in, it's not that far off of that, really. Especially when the biggest problem in football is
Then what does
scoring
that say about
goals.
Ten Hag, who was nowhere near 16th?
Yeah, I mean, I think that yeah, I mean, well, I wouldn't say he was nowhere near 16th, okay, in that respect, all right, because it wasn't that difference. I mean, you're talking about a few games of difference, but I will say this: one of the big factors that helped Ten Hag last year that he gets full credit for, and it was a surprise to me this much, is Scott McTominay. Scott McTominay was a player he was able to use very effectively to find goals when we needed them at the right time. And I don't think we have a player. Scott McTominay today would be a better number 9 than we have. And I don't think Scott McTominay was ever a midfielder. He's doing the same thing in Italy that he did here successfully under Ten Hag, which is be sort of that almost second striker, shadow box player, getting on the end of crosses and finding his way to score goals. I mean, it is crazy when you look at the number of points McTominay added last season on his goals alone, which was like it's like 13 or 16 points or something incredible like that, which is I mean, fair play to him and fair play to Ten Hag for figuring that out too, by the way, because he did deploy him well to do it. The game against Brentford, getting 2 goals in the last 5 minutes, takes a loss to a win. We don't have anybody who does that anymore. We don't have any players in the team that can even do that anymore.
We don't even have a football team that scores 2 goals anymore.
I know.
Um,
We don't score 2 goals in the Premier League in a month anymore.
Alejandro Garnacho's interview yesterday was quite shocking in
Mhm.
that actually I didn't believe the quotes when I first read them.
Me too, yeah.
And then I heard the interview, and Alejandro Garnacho has given me vibes where he feels like he's above this,
Mhm.
where he's better than United, where it's almost an insult to ask him to go out and track back,
Yeah.
to do things where we should be just grateful for his presence, and that it's everybody else's problem, not his. Now, this attitude is something you can't have in United's dressing room, because I believe he's not the only player that thinks that, by the way.
Sure,
Uh,
agreed.
and
Yep.
this is why you get these issues where they never get fixed, because everyone thinks it's someone else's problem. Said that he will go away, enjoy the summer, and then we'll see. Um, I don't like ad games. Like, to me, I don't make idle subtle threats.
Mhm.
Like, first of all, everyone knows he wanted to go in January.
Yep.
And I've been saying on this podcast for a long time that I think United will sell him.
Yep.
He's had an issue with his brother that
Mhm.
United should have reeled in a long, long time ago.
Yep.
And so should he have, because inevitably when it's his brother, you're not sure what is Alejandro's thoughts and what is Roberto's. Is Alejandro using Roberto's account? All this nonsense.
Mhm.
And this to me is something that is, I can't, it's unconscionable, not unconscionable, but it's unthinkable for me why United wouldn't
I
have
Yep.
addressed that,
Yep.
right?
It's been over a year this has been happening
No,
unchecked
yeah, it's been going on. I remember him getting in trouble for United against Spurs away. I think it was the night
last
before. It was
season.
going, if you knew, yeah, last season.
Yeah.
This before the Sancho thing happened, right when the Sancho thing happens, and I think
Yep.
I remember him saying something like, if you knew what we knew, how the team was picked, and then he had to delete it.
Yep.
um, this is all that being considered. I don't blame Amorim for dropping him for the final for that. I really don't, because that's when you talk about changing culture. That's where you change it.
Yeah.
You put a player under selection pressure and say, okay, you're going to have some introspection and reflection, and see that you have a problem, or are you going to see that we're the problem, and if so, then you have to leave, because we can't have that. What did you think of that Garnacho interview?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is exactly that, and it's the type of thing where I give a little bit of, I was pretty critical of Amram yesterday as someone who supports him a lot, but I look at that and I think these are the problems that you have to deal with in this club that you shouldn't, but that you do. You haven't had a window to sort that out. You haven't had a window to get rid of players who are doing this. When you're only forward, when you're only forward who is currently at the club that can stretch a defense and can run is the player who I'll just give you a stat here. Man United have the second lowest conversion rate of big chances this season in the Premier League, 22 out of 80. That means that the league averages 36%. They're at 27%. They've missed 58 out of their 80 big chances this season. The top of that list is Garnacho. He's missed 14 out of his 16 big chances this season. When your only player who can stretch a defense, who can run, is missing chances week in and week out. And Amarin commented on this against Lyon when United were up 2-0. Garnacho's through on goal, has a chance to put it away, doesn't. Directly ties to the comeback. We've talked about how that happens every single time. Players don't do what they're supposed to in that moment, and it bites us. Against Bilbao, he was through on goal, missed a chance again with an awful attempt at a chip. Those are the things that a manager will look at and say, I can't trust a player from a player perspective to do that. You need to do better. If a player responds poorly to that, there's not much you can do with them. And this is the challenge that you have is you have to end up dropping a player who provides you with something nobody else can
Yes.
because they can't accept discipline. They can't accept the need to improve. They can't accept responsibility for maybe they're not as good as they think they are. And you're trying to push them and motivate them to be better. I give the example of
Yeah.
Casemiro, who publicly talked about this. He gave an interview before and about how proud he was of this season, where he took himself from not being relied upon and not being liked by the coach to becoming important for him. That's what but Casemiro's a winner. That's a top mentality, regardless of how the season ended, regardless of the game. That's the mentality you want from players. And that is a different culture to, you know, be throwing a fit because you've been dropped. And but you can't compromise because the moment you give in to a player because they're going to be upset that you're dropping them, you've lost. It's
I
over
agree.
for you.
These are things that, and it's a good point because, excuse me, whatever challenges Garnacho faces here, I don't. Let's say he goes to Real Madrid tomorrow. He's going to have similar challenges at Real Madrid, and
The
it's going
fans
to
are a lot
be
meaner than ours, by the way.
well. But how does a human being? I want to
Yeah.
know who you are. How does a human
Yeah.
being respond to adversity? How do they respond to challenges? How do they respond to disappointment? And if it is to respond, and some of this can be immaturity too, but if it is about it's your fault, it's his fault, it's their fault, it's not my fault,
Yeah.
that's going to show up everywhere. That's going to show up in the challenges you meet elsewhere. And if I'm someone, a potential suitor of Garnacho, I'm looking at that with a bit of concern. There's examples of players playing for clubs that get relegated who give
Mhm.
everything to the final ball,
Yep.
and they understand that they have an individual and a collective responsibility, and those are players that everybody wants. I mean, I remember Ferguson justifying buying Phil Jones off the back of a 7-1 Blackburn defeat when he was like a captain, excuse me, the whole seven, during the whole those 7 goals. Roy Keane, when Forest got relegated, give everything to the very end. And there's lots of examples like this.
Mhm.
So to me, this is about defining character, and
Yep.
Garnacho is not passing that test. Ruben Amorim also came out and said something about justifying Garnacho being left out by he who missed the big chance against Bilbao, and then I don't like that, James. Like that's something I expect to read from a fan online. I don't expect my manager to say something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's becoming of a manager who, that seems to me a bit petulant, a bit angry. Like that I think you have to be more measured than that. And this has been one of my issues with Amarim, where he has said things that I've had to double check and go, no way he said that. That's been picked up wrong. No way that. And then I read it and I'm going, how does this help anything? Because I'm sure Garnacho knew this himself. And I'm sure that was communicated to Garnacho.
Mhm.
And if it wasn't, for it to be communicated in a press conference makes it even worse. To me, that is something I don't expect my manager to do.
Yeah, I get that for sure. I get that for sure. And there's been questionable things. At the same time, I'll tell you within the context of what I know, it was communicated. and the response from the player was so poor that I'm not sure he particularly cares about whether
Well, you
he's.
still keep it in house, James. And
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah.
Amorim's responsible for his response.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. I get that. I definitely don't think he was particularly happy with Garnacho in general, whether he should say that or not. I think obviously that's what came
Mm.
through with that he was very unhappy with him.
Y-
And it's not because of missing the chance, but because of the response to probably the discussion they had about that, whether he should or shouldn't do it, that for sure. I tend to
yeah.
agree keeping things, in-house in that respect, but that is certainly underneath that.
The other big looming question is, of course, Kabi Mainu, who once again got 2 minutes. When Kabi Mainu came into United, he was transformative, exceptional player, a big game player. Showed up United on many big game occasions. In fact, were it not for Mainu, United wouldn't be in this competition. He was pivotal in the FA Cup game against Liverpool. He was pivotal in the Cup final against City. He was pivotal in the Lyon comeback. We've seen him score goals away to Wolves and stuff, big key moments. And to me, you can have a system that sacrifices someone like a Kabi Mainu and say, look, you're a good player, but you can't fit in my system, but you have to be winning games. If this is a massive risk for United, because Kabi Mainu, as the player, has to leave. And I don't know how he doesn't play or how he plays. You know, why, what does he have to do? What does he have to do differently? I don't know. And to me, that's a big problem.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are a bit concerning on that respect to me. One of the things that's a little surprising to me is that I don't have the exact answers. I have a little bit of, a hint as to this, at least to a degree, but you never know. When Amarim came in, he went and played Manuel Ugarte and Kabi Manu together quite a lot in the beginning, and I actually thought they had some pretty good games. Liverpool away at Anfield still sticks out in my mind because I still think it was one of our best performances in the league in a long, long time. Even though it ended in a 2-2 draw, Liverpool end up, of course, winning the league handily, clearly the best team in England. There's where United have struggled. The Premier League, they can't beat anybody. They can't score goals. They went into Anfield, scored 2 goals, probably should have won, dodgy penalty type of thing that ends up, biting them. One of their best performance with those 2 in the midfield. Um, I don't know, some of it has just been, to me, described as uh, issues with fitness. Kobe Mainu picked up a pretty bad injury in the early part of the season before Ruben Amorim came in. Muscular injury, he was maybe he was overplayed, maybe he was tired. I don't know what the reason was for that, but he picked up that injury. He played for a while. He picked up another injury, that had him kept out for a couple of months there. I don't know if it would just have looked different. I don't know if just the team had gotten into a flow in the midfield and all of that then he didn't want to interrupt. But what makes me strongly question that as well in that respect, and I do think we need to. It is an area of concern is that that midfield flow that got United to the Europa League final was Ugarte and Casemiro in the midfield. Ugarte didn't even make an appearance in this final, and they won every game with him and Casemiro. In fact, kind of an amazing stat that wouldn't match up with what most people think, but um, United have not won a lot of games this season. They've won 13 games with Ugarte in the midfield since Ten Hag left, and I think they've won 2 without him in the midfield. It's a bit insane to me to have made that kind of change at the final death knell of the season in the biggest game. But it's just it is a question for me because I could have understood Kobe not playing because they had a flow going. Casemiro Ugarte, they're winning every game, they're getting you through to the final, and so you're going to stick with that. But to change it and still not have a place for Kobe Mainu is a bit of a worry to me. That can't be your midfield next season, Casemiro and Bruno. It can't be. And so what are we working towards, in that case? I think fitness is definitely a part of it, but you have to find a place for Kobe Manu in the team. He's not the type of talent that I think it's worth sacrificing for anybody.
You would talk about Bruno Fernandes. I think after the final whistle yesterday, that's the most disappointed I've ever seen him in the
Mm,
United shirt.
yep.
And I was listening to Andy Mitten's interview with Luke Shaw, and there's a very dark, somber mood around United that I haven't seen ever amongst players, where there's just a resignation and a rejection about the situation, the dejection, totally dejected, and resignation about it. And I look at that and think that could result in one or two, I don't want to say earthquakes or bombshells happening, but something that could be quite significant. And I look at Bruno Fernandes, who has an unbelievable offer, and I just wonder, James, where he starts to ask himself, how much more do I want to put up with this? We talk about this treadmill that other players, start to exhibit a certain body language that shows, how you get in the end of a relationship where you're in love with what the relationship was, and the hardest part is to leave because there's a finality to that. But that period between, that recognizing that the relationship you had is gone and you need to leave is really painful and dark.
Yep.
And I just feel like Bruno Fernandes, I think Marcus Rashford was in that
Mhm.
period and it didn't look good. And I worry that some United players might be in that headspace where it's hard to leave because they still love the place, but there's also a recognition that the football club they're at right now is not conducive to bring the best out in them. So I just worry. Oh, I worry, but I think there might be one or two big things that come from this that, and Bruno Fernandes might be one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I had the same thought at the end of the game yesterday, and in a video, kind of asked that question myself, like, why would you stay, at this
Yeah,
point? Like, that's kind of how I look at it. Like, he wants to win, from his perspective. Not, I want Bruno sold. It wasn't this type of reaction to a bad game, nothing like that at all. But why would he stay? You want to win trophies, you want to compete at the highest level. The other factor in that is, like, I know people don't love to hear it, but one thing that is true is United have to not cheat on fixing this team if they are to get back where they need to be. They can't cheat. We can't do this again of saying, we're going to be fine in a year. It's okay. That's all it takes. We'll buy a couple players to score some goals and everything's going to be okay. The team's cheated all the time. It's always been cheating. We've everything that we've done has been a fast track cheat to try to get back to some semblance of relevance without actually building something sustainable that will keep us at a high level for a long time. And that might take 2 years. And it might take longer. I don't know whether it works or not. Regardless, it does take time. It's not a one season thing. But by the time, if it is done right, and if United don't cheat, by the time they are there, presuming it works, is Bruno still the player he is? Is he still at, the with his age, with everything, like, is he still the player that's there winning to win titles, to win the biggest things or not? And from his perspective, I would sincerely look at that and say, maybe not. Then what's the point in sticking around for this? And to a degree, I don't know that it would be, I'm not saying it would be right to move Bruno on, but it is one of the things that is hard is I think it's hard to fix things when if you have too many players who feel that way, you know what I mean? Who feel tainted by the past. It's hard to move on from that, even if they're not the problem. Like, Bruno's not the
yeah,
problem, and people are completely wrong. Marcus was not the problem either. Obviously, it's not like it's all been fixed, like some people claim. They're not the problem. Bruno's not the problem, but that doesn't mean they haven't been tainted by what is there. And it's hard
yeah,
to get past that to a degree sometimes. And you start to think, well, is a completely fresh start just better for everybody? Can we move past it? Does that feeling remain, and it never goes away until everybody goes that has been touched by the poison that has been here for such a long time?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a psychological toll, and inevitably you develop behaviors that are coping mechanisms that are about
Yeah.
dealing with all the darkness and the shit they're surrounded by. And it's very, very difficult when it's in the walls to bring a fresh attitude towards that and not have some type of psychological toll from
Yep.
being there and enduring it. So it's very difficult to bring a fresh approach to it. So yeah, like I don't know, but I would be, what more promises can they make? Bruno Fernandez, I understood last summer, okay, we've Ineos, we've got this team in, we've got money, we've got, oversight, and we have, professional guidance, and it didn't result. In fact, it resulted in, let's be honest, and it is too soon to make any type of verdict or assessment on Ineos right now. Um, but this does not look like a team that's going to be anywhere close to challenging for a title in the next
Mm,
in 2 to 3 years, which are Bruno's
mm,
prime.
yeah.
So we'll see what happens with that.
Now there have been teams fallen out of Europe entirely, like Chelsea, that have gone on to win titles pretty soon afterwards, but I wouldn't necessarily compare the situations one to one.
Yeah, these
You know?
are that is extremely rare. But
Yeah.
yes. Um, Other than that, with this summer, what obviously I think they'll probably announce Cunha relatively soon. They'll need to do that to have a change of attitude towards United and put a change of ambience, if you like. But I have a feeling they'll push for Ederson at Atalanta as well, from one or two things that I'd heard.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I agree with with that. I think Cunha. I think his release clause technically becomes active after this weekend when the season is officially over. It's payable in installments, which actually makes it quite a good deal for as far as a release clause goes,
Yes.
because usually they're not. Um, that makes it simple. He's essentially agreed terms. It's a very it is a very good deal, regardless of everything else going on. He's a very good player, and the fact that a player like that wants to join United given the situation, unquestionably, is a very positive sign. It shows the right fight, the right determination, right mentality, all of that. I think Cunha is an excellent, excellent signing, but we do certainly need more of them. What I do like is the mental, physical profile of a athletic fighting player that I think when you watch him week in and week out, you think I'm proud of the player playing. You don't walk away thinking, "What the hell was that?"
Mm,
Yeah, they have about 90 to 100 million to spend without the other significant sales that they could raise. They're receiving very likely a fairly substantial windfall from Alvaro Fernandez, which is, I
yeah.
think, maybe a little bit of a surprise, but I guess we have to give credit to John Murtaugh for that somehow.
Why
No,
wouldn't
but
United have bought him back though?
I don't know. I mean, I would guess the assessment is just that he's not good enough for them. Now, good enough for Madrid, not good enough for United. I don't know. I was surprised when they sold him in the first place back then. I think a lot of people were, especially given we went that whole season without a left back and we sold Alvaro. So maybe we don't give anybody any credit for this, but regardless, as it is, United are set to stand and gain about 15 to 18 million in profit, which is actually quite substantial from a PSR perspective. That's
But to
almost
be
an entire.
fair, when United loaned him out, he didn't play much at first 6 months. I
No,
think when he went to Benfica on the second
yeah.
loan, where it really started to take off, because he went to Spain, if I remember first. Was it Girona or something he went to?
Yeah, there was a couple loans, and then he ended up getting sold to Benfica, basically with all of that and kicked on. But so
Yeah, it
fair
was.
enough.
Yeah,
Sometimes it
yeah.
just, but that's what you want from loans and these things too, right? I mean, I wouldn't say it was necessarily a bad thing in general. Sometimes that's just that's what you hope to get out of this. But United stands to make a little bit of money from that, and it has a significant impact on PSR when you get that kind of profit. So they're very likely to be able to spend a bit more than that. Obviously, we're going to be talking about Garnacho being very likely to be sold, a significant profit from that. Marcus Rashford. I think, still likely to be leaving
Mm,
to somewhere. I think Deco today commented how they like Rashford there
mm.
at Barcelona. So that's obviously the move he'd like to make. I think that's always been clear, and one I hope does happen for him.
I know nothing.
I hope that's one that happens. Let's put it that way. I think it would be great for him. So that's what I hope. It would be great for him. Um, some other, there's a decent chunk of free agent departures. Sancho and Anthony, we'll have to see what happens to them. But, they need a striker. And I think that the big thing right now, the big question at the moment, because it has to be a priority, is who do they get? There's been a lot more talk of Gyökeres in the last week. It
Yeah.
seemed like it might be required to get Champions League. I'm not so sure that that's true at the end of it. Um, United might slightly fall into a bit of luck on this basis that the other teams chasing him have other targets they might get. Arsenal, it seems like, are being pushed by Arteta to go for Benjamin Šeško, which would end their pursuit of him. They're seemingly in talks for Rodrigo, which is a bit of a surprise as well. Chelsea could go for Delap. They could go for Ekitike. They're looking at them. Where does Gyökeres go if he wants to go to England then, if not United, to join his former manager and play in this system? I think they're going to make an attempt to convince him still, despite the loss. And then if not, we're probably talking about Delap again pretty quickly.
Well, there was also reports. Fabrizio was mentioning that there's still Italian clubs looking at Rasmus Højlund,
Yes,
which would
Inter
surprise me.
Milan. Yeah.
But what are we thinking there? Loan or full sale?
I think it'll have to be a loan. The book value is so crazy expensive. The 40 million. Nobody's paying 40 million at this stage for Rasmus Højlund, right? And so it doesn't really do you any good to sell him for 20. But if you can get a loan next season, he's worth 28. I would look for a loan and a 28 million option. I kind of wish they'd been able to do that with Anthony, right? Get a loan plus 33 million options so that with how good it's been, someone could just snap it up. But something like that, I think, is much, much more likely to happen because, no club's going to pay top dollar for him right now, given the present situation. And there's no point in United taking a loss on him. But a loan with an option would be good. I think it would work.
Well, forgot I have my microphone on mute.
It's all good. All good.
All right, matey, we'll go ahead and leave it there.
Yeah.
We will be back, I suppose, on Monday after the weekend. United play Villa this weekend, although I haven't had much interest in a lot of the league games recently. I can't imagine that this is one that will be on the edge of my seat.
Win might be worth a lot of money to both clubs. That's about all that, For Villa, it's a big game, right? They Champions League. If they win this, they need to get
Well,
there.
if United win, Villa didn't turn up. So I wonder if United lose against themselves in training.
Probably.
After that game yesterday, both teams just should have got a smack in the face instead of a trophy and a medal, because it was
I know.
honestly
Something else, wasn't it?
Yes. All right, mate. We'll leave it there. Commiserations to all the United fans who are sure feeling exactly how we're feeling. And
to everyone who traveled for that and put in a lot of time, effort, and
remarkable.
money for what you're seeing, and they're probably still traveling back. I know some people are. So
yeah, those people had spent an absolute fortune who were let down once again. In awe of United support, which really the players don't deserve on many occasions. But United fans once again showing why they're some of the best fans in the world and why United players are lucky to have people like that who follow this club all over the world. We'll be back on Monday for our last one of the season. So thanks to all of you for tuning in. Jamesy, all the best, mate. Take it easy.
see you later, buddy.
See you, mate.